Hello and welcome back to Southview House Exotic. So today I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about watering and irrigation in general and how I water the garden here at Southview House Exotic, and also some tips on how it can really help you guys either planning your kind of irrigation style kind of watering, or tips on how to kind of conserve water a little bit. So without further ado, let's have a little look at the equipment that I use here. Equipment wise, I actually keep things pretty simple. So I have a hose reel which will get around most areas of the garden, and that is for when the weather's kind of, I don't know, 28 Celsius and above, and for more than a few days I will use the kind of the hose as a last resort really to get around and water some of the most crucial plants to keep watered in the garden. With the hose reel, I also use this lance, which helps you control the water to the roots in particular. So you can adjust the end so that you can get a fine spray on it rather than a really aggressive kind of jet on there. So that is very useful. You've also got a trigger on it, so you can kind of stop watering when you're walking across like a patio or something, and you don't want to waste all the water on there. So it's really good kind of to save water with one of those. Now, what I would say is we're lucky down here. We're with Portsmouth Water, and they at the moment don't have a hosepipe ban, whereas obviously a lot of the south and the southwest and southeast have got quite a lot of hosepipe bans at the moment. So hosepipe might not be the option for certain people, but for you that can use it, it is very useful. It's quite time saving over using a watering can. So yeah, quite useful in that sense. I do sometimes use a sprinkler with it, but obviously because that wastes a lot of water, I will quite often only put that in an area where I can't get my other irrigation, and I'll probably put it on for like an hour to soak the area, and that might be kind of once a week or maybe twice a week if the temperatures are extremely high. But that's mainly used to keep certain areas of the grass from totally dying off, such as my kind of Italian walkway. It's got a very narrow path, and it does dry out quite a lot because of where the trees are as well. So maybe something that I kind of change to a different material in the future to try and save water. Okay, next up is the humble watering can. Now I have a couple of watering cans this size, which is a 10 litre. They're basically about the kind of weight once filled up that is kind of you want to be carrying around. You don't want to be carrying around too much heavier than that. They're very useful for applying water from the water barrel. So if I'm feeding plants in particular, I will use rainwater and then mix in some feed. And obviously I can calculate the quantities a lot better with this because I know that's 10 litres of liquid on there. So yeah, watering cans are really good like that. The only other time I would use a watering can really is for if I'm watering something like the banana trees that I'm trying to kind of establish. I will put a couple of cans of water on them, maybe each day if it's say 34-35 degrees, just to keep those ticking over, because my irrigation systems, although it delivers a little bit of water to them, it's not the amount of water that those particular plants will require. Another plant which is quite useful to use is for colocasia, as they're kind of quite water loving on there. And I might occasionally water pots with a watering can, but generally it's good if there's a hosepipe ban or something. This is going to be your only option, but it is very time consuming on that. Okay, so let's talk about irrigation systems. So in my lawn, I have a series of pop-up irrigation. So these are Rainbird 5000s, and this basically just sprays in a kind of arc around the lawn. So it's basically to keep the lawn from browning off in the hot weather. So in the back garden here, I have 6 heads, so 2 at the top of the garden. So I have one which is kind of around this area here. In fact, you might be able to see the end. There it is. So you can see that's where it's sunk back down. So I've got one over there. I've got one up near the spa, which basically waters all of the grass area over there. So that does the top part of the garden. I've got 2 kind of in the middle. So one back over where we were. There's one over here. And then my last 2, I have one in this position over here. And that one basically waters all of this section here and to the pond. So that's all the lower section done. And then just through here, we have one hidden just down here. And that one essentially sprays from about here. It sprays all the way around here to the path. And it goes right the way up to the tree ferns. So that assures that the tree ferns do get a water during the hot summer months. Now in this area is where I actually have my timers, so they're all kind of hidden around here. So I've got 2 HydroSure water timers there. So there's 2 pop-ups off of each one of these, and obviously that's 6 pop-ups. Then you've got one which is a drip hose which goes around the borders. Now just here we have basically a click-on tap point. During the day it dribbles a small amount of water into the pond, which is located just behind the bush there. So that keeps the pond gently topped up with water. So it is a very, very small trickle. I then unclip that, and I do have a hose in this location, and that is purely to give extra water to the tree ferns here and to the Musa Baju, which is in the corner here. And as you can see, one is flowering at the moment, ironically next to the fake bananas. See, as I run the kind of the black pipe around the garden, so you can see here, this is then mounted to a kind of tap point here. So this particular tap will water all of the kind of anything that I'm growing on, and the greenhouse as well. And as you can see, I've got a couple of water butts here which I use for, so that basically comes off of the shed there, and we're looking a little low at the moment. But I use that if I'm feeding plants. I give them a bit of a boost with actual rainwater and mix in the feed with that as well. So I had extra tap points installed, obviously professionally on there. So we've got a tap point here which has got really good pressure, and that one I use to run obviously my main kind of hose pipe if I need to. And that means I can water all of the kind of the bamboo and a lot of the plants in pots here. And that sprinkler that I was on about earlier, I set up on this pathway here just to keep this bit irrigated. Because of all the plants and everything, the irrigation doesn't spray into this zone. So I have to basically put a sprinkler set up here until we reach to about this point here. And then that upper sprinkler does all of this section. So it's only really this section here I have to worry about. It'd be nice to eventually put a pop-up in this particular area, as it would save me a lot of time pulling the kind of sprinkler in and out. The side of the house here, I actually have another tap point. So this one is usually if we want to wash the cars down, and I use this to fill up my watering cans there, but also it does have another hose point down here. So this is a leaky hose, and this does the border around the side here. It does get super dry. It's in front of the house here, and it doesn't get a lot of rain into this position. So that basically does till about there. And then in the front garden here, it's quite complicated, but we have a tap here which has got good pressure, and essentially this runs to the back garden to give me really good pressure on there, because this is where the water comes into the house. And then this one does my front garden irrigation, so I can turn those off if I need to as well. And then that runs to this point here. So I have a water timer here with 4 outlets. So we've got another leaky hose, which is the one on this side here. That does this little front border. This is a drip hose, which drips throughout the borders of the front garden. And then we've got our 2 for the grass. So looking at the grass, we've got pop-ups in the front garden. So we have one is located just down here. So that waters all of that section and round to here. We have another one in this corner here, and that waters this path and back across there. And then we also have, there's one here somewhere. So that waters all of this section here. And then we have one further down here. It's around this area. That waters all of this around to here. So that means all of the garden is covered by the irrigation. Now the drip hose, I'll just show you. So this is the drip hose here. It's like a brown one, and it has a pressure sensitive drip from it. So that means that I can water all of the kind of plants along these narrow strips that are not covered by the other parts of the irrigation. So essentially, with the irrigation systems which I've got in place, I would say about 90% of the garden is automated when it comes to the watering. And those timers can be set to water each and every day for as long as you want. And obviously, hour-wise, I set mine to about half an hour each station, just so that it gives a decent kind of water. And obviously, if it's really hot, the levels of water will build up if you're putting half an hour each day on it, because some will burn off but some will stay in the soil, so that will get you through basically through a heat wave. Now with this irrigation system, this is the most simplest one you can do, which is essentially you running a pipe off of a tap, and then you've got a water timer on the end of it, and from there you can put, with the pressure we have here, you can put 2 pop-ups on there, and you can get those from eBay or various irrigation kind of suppliers, and they're very easy. They work basically by the water going through them turns the mechanism, which then turns the actual heads. There's no electrics involved in it at all, and I don't have a pump at all because I don't have like a reservoir of water that the irrigation system is running off. It is purely running off of the pressure of the mains, which is why you can only run 2 pop-ups off of each kind of feed. So for a smaller garden, it might not be a problem. You could maybe even have just 1 off of there, and you just bury them in the soil and make sure that they're all kind of compacted around so they don't move around too much. But it's generally a very cheap way of doing an irrigation system without putting in massive amounts of kind of infrastructure on there. So other little tips for actually for watering in general. So time of day of watering, early morning is ideal, but not everybody's going to be able to get up early enough, or if they're working, that's going to be a problem. So the next best time really is in the evening time. You don't want to be spraying the plants with water. That doesn't really help things at all, and it can burn the leaves of the plant. So it's best to put the water where it's needed most, so that is at the root system. So ideally you want like a fine spray to the soil area so that it doesn't all kind of wash away. And I find that the soil can become quite hydrophobic, which means that it will repel water. So if you're watering with a hose and you want to get the most out of it, and you're obviously not on a hose pipe ban, the best thing to do is to water the soil around that plant for, say, 30 seconds, just to wet that area. Move through the garden, water your plants, and then come back around and do a proper soak of that particular area that you wet. The reason being is if the ground becomes hydrophobic and repels water, the problem you're going to have is if you stand there with a hose, the water is just going to continually run off that surface and not soak in. So what you need to do is break that resistance with some water on the surface, and then come back to the plant and then properly soak it. Which leads me on to the next tip, really, is you don't want to water the plants too frequently. You want to do a nice deep water. So depending on the size of the plant, if it's herbaceous perennial, you're looking at that the top, say 10 to 15 centimeters of the soil you want to make damp. Any more than that, it just goes down into the lower soil, and that perennial is not really going to take it up. If it's a shrub, you want to water as deeply as you can. So either once or twice a week, a really good soak of that soil, and then that will keep that plant going for longer. Pots are more tricky because in an ideal world, you want to check with your fingers to make sure how damp that pot is. You don't want it absolutely saturated. A lot of plants don't like that at all. And the problem with planters in general is you get very uneven watering. So for instance, during the height of the day when the sun's fully out, that plant is going to be mega hot. The root system's going to probably dry out completely, and then you're going to oversaturate that later on. So ideally you want to position your planters so that they're in a position where they can moderate their water uptake a little bit better on there. So yeah, getting water into pots, again, same principle as when you water in the ground. You've got to be careful that the water doesn't just drain down the sides of the pot and you end up with a solid lump of dry soil in the middle, which is repelling water. So again, ideally you want to put a little bit of water in there and then come back to the pot and do that. So they're really the things that I do to keep the water levels down on there. As I open the garden for charity, it's a little bit tricky in a sense that I have to try and make sure that the garden is looking as good as it can be most of the time, which unfortunately does require a large amount of water on there. So that's essentially the way I water things here, and a few tips on how to get the best out of the watering in your garden. I hope you found the video useful. It's been a difficult time at the moment with temperatures being almost 30 degrees every day for quite a few weeks, and that would be fine in the tropics, where you then get loads of rain and massive monsoon downpours. In the UK, we don't really get so much of that. When it goes dry, it stays dry for a long time, and yeah, it's really the autumn time where it gets back into the routine of having more regular watering. So yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you guys on the next one.